All right, welcome back, everybody, to the ATB NFL Live Show. I have a big week this week. Really great matchups for once. We know it's been kind of a slow, matchup-wise weeks in the NFL the past couple weeks, but a lot of big stories, but also a lot of big games. We'll definitely talk more about those at the end. I'm sure kind of everybody knows the two biggest games of the week, so we'll kind of keep those for the end. But I do want to start with a couple of conversations just about some things going on around the league. And I want to start personally, and I know that a lot of people are going to be talking about this probably until either it falls off or until the end of the season. Mike White makes his first start for the for the Jets this year after the benching of Zach Wilson and absolutely tears it up, which again, not saying that I expected him to do anything quite like he did this week, but he is just a more capable quarterback at this point. I think we kind of all knew that. So I want to toss it over to Tony first, division rival there. What do you think about Mike White's debut this past week, and what do you think about the Jets kind of moving forward the rest of the year?
Yeah, so I have two very opposite opinions on this. I think Mike White was a very clear upgrade, but the reason that he's an upgrade is also the reason I don't think he's a long-term starter. And he's an upgrade because he can run a system, especially a system designed very well to protect a quarterback. You just have your three-step drops, you get the ball out, you hit guys in rhythm, you have great receivers to get the yak. He was doing all of that, pulling all those levers perfectly. He's hitting Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson is always open and Garrett Wilson's running after the catch and making guys look silly and scoring touchdowns. He's doing what this offense and Mike LaFleur designed it to do. He's not special, right? Like he doesn't have any physical traits that make you think he's a great quarterback. We saw him do this last year where he came in against the Bengals and he ran that system to perfection. He scored 3 touchdowns, 400 yards. They upset the Bengals, who everybody knew were incredible. And then he collapsed. And his season ended 2 games after his incredible debut when he played the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo and threw 4 interceptions. Because when you go up against a real defense and you don't have the skills to get out of the perfect situations, you can get really demolished by a good team. So this week, I think it's going to be a middling performance for him. Next week, he plays the Bills in Buffalo. Some symmetry here. I don't expect the legend of Mike White to continue much further after that game. I do really love him as I think he's carved out a 10-year career as a backup, but talking about him as a starter, no, he's just an upgrade over a guy who doesn't know how to play football.
Totally fair to say. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah. So congratulations to the Jets that they got that win with Mike White. It was really fun. It was awesome. Great. It was against the Bears, who have one of the worst pass defenses in the league. Granted, Minnesota's pass defense is not that much better this week. However, they have people in their secondary that can make plays that I'm not necessarily seeing that can happen with the Bears. So, look, Mike White threw 8 interceptions last year. I don't think that's quite talked about as much when everybody talks about him rocketing the ball down the field and all that stuff. Yeah, he scored 5 touchdowns. But he also threw 8 interceptions. A 5-to-8 interception touchdown interception ratio is not great. So look, it was a cool 1 week, but I don't think Mike White's your long-term starter. Zach Wilson's not your long-term starter. Unfortunately for the Jets, you're stuck in the same position where you guys still don't have a quarterback, but the rest of the team is fantastic. That's what sucks right now is that we're watching this team and they look really good. They look really awesome, but what's happening with the offense? What's happening with quarterback? What are you guys going to do to answer that question?
And I think that's where this all kind of comes back to, guys, because I kind of agree with you for the most part, where White is a guy who he's not going to elevate your team any higher than they already are. Right. He's one of those quarterbacks that he's a smart player. It seems like he does do what he's told to do, basically, which, again, in an offense that has some good weapons now and has a decent offensive line despite the injuries they faced, that's all he really has to do to play at least at a higher level than Wilson was playing, because Wilson wasn't doing the easy stuff. He wasn't, going to his checkdowns. He wasn't, hitting guys in stride in the middle of the field whenever they're wide open. He just wasn't doing any of that. So he's an upgrade for now and probably even for the rest of the year, I would guess. Maybe Wilson comes back in if he does have a meltdown against the Bills like he did last year or whatever may happen. But I think there's a decent chance that he can keep it going at least through the end of the year just because the weapons are better. He has a Garrett Wilson now. The the running backs are more. There's just more guys in that room that can play. Even with Carter out, like you have James Robinson and even. I mean, Donovan Knight, Bam Knight, out of I think it was NC State he came out of. I think if I'm not mistaken, he ran the ball really well. Like it's just right now, I think that team offensively is better than it was last year. So it's not as much about him just going out and throwing the ball down the field. It's about just letting your guys make plays, and there's more guys to make plays. But again, this comes back to the fact that eventually the Jets are going to have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, who is this quarterback for this team as we've now built up a roster that's playoff worthy? Who is it? And I think Garoppolo, especially, that was the guy that I was thinking the most in going into the offseason. But now there's reports that maybe he's going to be back with San Francisco next year. You know, we're not sure about that, obviously, at this point. We're going to have to wait till the offseason. But if San Fran does decide to go that route again and they kind of give up on the Lance experiment, like, is that somebody maybe they go to try to replace Wilson as like a project guy? Because at least Lance has shown more flashes than Wilson probably has. Do they try to go that route? Do they draft somebody, even though they're probably not going to have a very high draft pick? Like, there's just not a lot of good avenues to upgrade a quarterback at this point outside of a veteran. And none of the veterans that might be available would be a big enough upgrade to spend $20+ million a year on, even with this very, young, talented roster. So Jets are kind of in a weird spot. Like, I hope they make the playoffs for their fans' sake, but it's probably not going to mean a whole lot if they make the playoffs this year, unless White can just continue to make like a gigantic hot streak and continue on from there. But I don't see that being the case. So, but any other thoughts on that, guys?
Derek Carr, 2023 New York Jets.
Yeah, again, like something like that. If Carr wants to
trade for Russell Wilson,
give the Broncos a 4th round pick and pay half the salary, and you might be able to get it done. But no, Carr makes a lot of sense
to run on offense the way it's supposed to be run. It's Russell Wilson.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he definitely doesn't want to just do
Jets country. Let's ride.
Jeez, yeah, it just makes my skin crawl. Anyway, let's moving on with that though. There is something a little bit less fun that we do need to kind of address that is happening this week. Deshaun Watson is going to make his debut for the Cleveland Browns after over 700 days of not playing any NFL football. There's a lot going on around that situation. There's, some of his accusers are going to be at the game, which has been a whole controversial thing in its own right. He's coming back now, obviously, for the first time playing for this team after getting a fully guaranteed contract. And in general, I'll just start with this, and then I'll let you guys kind of go from there. I really just don't care anymore about the situation because we've gotten as much information as I think we're ever going to get about it, and I just don't really care to talk that much about it anymore. I think that he's going to probably play out his contract with the Browns. I think that unless he were to do something else in the same vein, which from whatever all the reports saying, apparently he's progressing well in his treatment or whatever the hell they're doing for him, which I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean at this point because he's apparently didn't do anything wrong according to him. But whatever the case may be, I think that we'll have to probably deal with him for quite a long time to some degree. But I obviously, as a Steelers fan and as a fan of, not people that do the stuff that he does or has done, I hope he doesn't have any success. I hope the Browns suffer for it. And I hope that this week, even against a Houston team that he knows well and is not very good right now, I hope that they find a way to pull it out. And I don't expect him to play very well in the first game after, over 2 years almost of not playing. But what do you think for this one, Tony?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say on the topic. I feel like there's a lot I'm not qualified to speak on.
Right,
not my
100%.
But what I will say is I'm never going to be a fan of this guy. I'm always going to be rooting against him. I hope that he gets embarrassed today. In a true football sense, like you said, we haven't seen him play for over 700 days, and we've seen Jacoby Brissett play really well in Cleveland. I think that how many games do we see before he's even outplaying Jacoby Brissett? Like, do we see Browns fans start to turn on him relatively quickly because they have seen competent play from a guy who hasn't, sexually assaulted over 20 people? I am always going to be rooting against this guy, and I hope it crashes and burns. And I know he's going to be there a while, but I hope it crashes and burns hard.
Yeah. So out of the three of us, I think I have a bit more of a unique side of viewing Deshaun Watson, given the logo on my hat right now, as the Dolphins were very much involved for the trade talks for Deshaun Watson. And all I'll say is right here, you can go to @ZachNer And you can see all of how I felt about the Deshaun Watson thing on my Twitter account. I was very vehemently against any sort of transaction for him to come to the Dolphins, and put on my Twitter profile. I was very close to not being a fan of the team anymore if they had signed or if they had traded for him, because it is not something. Ooh, excuse me, sorry. By the way, everybody, sorry, I apologize if I'm a little off. I've been sick this week, so just recovering. Just acknowledgement. But yeah, it's just it was disgusting, despicable. There really was no like resolution or really like good like ending to any of this yet. The reports from the like progress, if you actually read the article, there's nothing in there. It doesn't say anything about what he's doing to progress or like be any better. And again, as you said, Shayne, what does that mean when he says he doesn't think he did anything wrong? How is he getting any better? Because in his mind, he can't get any better. He didn't do anything. So this is another game. He's another quarterback in the league. We've, as a society, decided that some people can get away with some things that other people can't. And it is what it is. But, you know, I'm just here to go to my job every day and live my life. So I can't, I can't, at the end of the day, like as much as it pisses me off, like I can't, like, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, we don't have direct control over the situation, and
Yeah.
I think that there is a fine line between like just doing what your due diligence is and reporting on Deshaun Watson, and also like factoring in what we know of him. And I think it does create a dynamic where when we're covering players that have these problems that have come up for them, right? Whether it's legal issues, personal issues, whatever it may be, you do have to factor in the human element of things, but you also have to, especially if you want to respect what you do have to, report on it as fairly as you think you can. And like, obviously, like if Deshaun Watson plays great, I'm not going to sit here and say he's a bad quarterback. I'm just going to say that he's very likely a very bad person. That's what it comes down.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what we have to do for that.
And so that's something that I've tweeted out so many times. It's like, look, if you want to separate from football from the rest of everything, yeah, okay, cool. Deshaun Watson is a fantastic quarterback, but that does not take away the fact that there are some very, 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 very serious questions that need to be had about his personal life and his character. Yeah. And that cannot be avoided. We cannot take the people that play sports are human. You cannot take that away from sports. No. They are humans. That is a job. They have to follow the same rules as everybody else. You can't just discard that because they have a higher profile job than the three of us or anybody else that's watching us, or even, I mean, it just doesn't, it gets so confusing.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, with it, I don't want to spend too much time on it at this point moving forward. We'll talk about the Browns, as the Browns as they are. We'll see what they kind of do from here. But for the most part, just kind of ready to hopefully not talk about it too much outside of whenever something does happen with them, I suppose. So, but I know that, Tony, you wanted to talk about this next topic a little bit just because your team is involved. Perhaps we'll see about that. We have the OBJ sweepstakes situation going on. Apparently, middle of this week coming up is when he's expected to make a decision on his final decision on a team, and it looks like it's between the Bills, the Giants, and the Cowboys. Very interesting combination of teams, obviously, for a lot of reasons. One with the Bills, trying to reunite with Von Miller, who he helped get a Super Bowl last year with the Rams, could reunite with the Giants, of course, as well, as they try to kind of keep their season going. And, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Very interesting that you go to them after his career started with the Giants. So first, let me go to Tony, what you think overall, and then what do you think his decision ultimately is going to be?
Yeah, so I have had so many feelings about the Odell situation through the entirety of the season, because I think it was always a reality that we would be in the conversation. So I've been paying attention. He visited the Giants on Thursday, flew to Buffalo on Friday, left Buffalo today. He's taking a day off. He's going to Dallas on Monday. He's not going to sign with anybody immediately. He's going to take the middle of the week, talk with his family, sign a contract after the fact. The first question, and I think the most important question, is, will he play this year? We've seen plenty of reports now that he wasn't looking out for these teams. He's just going on a visit to see if he likes the vibes, I guess. So if he's not working out, and he tore his ACL back in February, so that is a long recovery path, that there's a chance that he doesn't play this year. And I think that immediately eliminates Buffalo from the conversation. We're looking for a mercenary for this year. We're not trying to sign a guy to a long-term deal. They'd probably try to pursue somebody younger, somebody in the draft kind of thing, if they were not going to get any benefit this year. I think that would spell really good news for the Giants if he's not playing this year, because then it's a long-term focus. They have cap constrictions this year. They don't in future years, so that they can fit him in for, a 3-year deal or whatever. And obviously they're not really looking for a Super Bowl competition this year. And then Dallas, I think they can go either way. If he's playing this year, that they're going to love that. If he's not, I don't know that they care. Like they'd still throw him a bag. And then if he is playing, how much money and how much term on the deal? Because again, if it's anything other than a short term, like, mid-value contract, I think Buffalo's out. I think they're going to make a very conservative offer and tell them that's our offer, and we're not really going to budge on that. They've done that before, and they've lost out on players before because of it. But that's just how Brandon Beane works. If he wants the long term and he's okay with backloading the money, the Giants are still in play. If he wants any amount of term and money, again, Dallas. And so you see where I'm going with this. You see where I'm leaning. He's ultimately going to end up. I think it's going to be Dallas, because I do think he's going to want that term. I think he's going to want that money. Dallas is the only team really able to provide both of those, along with a more guaranteed competitive window, because the Giants, it's all projection. It's just then at that point, very funny to me that the Cowboys before this season, they traded away Amari Cooper for a bag of peanuts when he had a very team-friendly deal. There was no guarantees or anything on it. It was just 20 per, not guaranteed. Like, you have a lot of wiggle room when it's not a guaranteed contract. And they didn't want to pay him $20 million because they were like, there's only 2 other receivers in the league making $20 million. Well, that landscape changed immediately. And now he's in Cleveland, thriving on a very team-friendly deal. And they got basically nothing to show for it. So to correct that, they are going to sign a guy who potentially might not play for them at all this season, a guy who is older, coming off of an ACL tear, his second ACL tear on the same knee. And it's just very funny, like the Jerry Jones mindset of, oh, we can't pay this guy $20 million. He's great, but he's not $20 million. Ship him away for nothing. Don't miss out on an entire season of value, and then still pay that same amount of money to a guy who is less reliable just because of injury and age. I think that's how it's going to go, and it's just funny to me. But I hope it goes.
Absolutely.
Still hope.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think for this one, Zach?
Yeah, pretty much everything that Tony just said. I see him either going to the Giants or Cowboys, because like Tony said, he's on my fantasy team. I doubt he's going to start any week this week, because that's just how my fantasy season has gone. But I don't know. This has just been such a weird thing, especially with the plane incident last week and all. Like, it's just been so drawn out. It's just like, dude, you want to play football? Come on, let's play football. Like, I don't understand why it has to be this big spectacle.
Yeah,
I
think for me with Odell, like, we know that he's kind of a character for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, it is what it is with that. Guys are going to be quirky.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get it. But like, there's
but
also like, he's trying to get himself on a team, but also like slightly like being a bit extra, and that's something that a lot of teams are not a fan of.
For sure.
The added media. I don't get why to make all the fuss and whatever, but he'll sign with somebody, and then it will all be over, and we can finally see him play football. That's what I'm excited for. I just want to see him play football, because the man is fantastic on the football field.
Yeah, last time we saw him, obviously he probably was in line to be a possible Super Bowl MVP prior to knee injury. So I think it just comes down to, like, and I think you guys already touched on it for the most part, does he play this year? And I think if he does, it's probably in the playoffs. I feel like if he signs with one of these teams and if they make the playoffs, which we assume at least the Bills and Giants obviously will, the Dallas obviously will, Giants are kind of, in that spot where they could fall out of it. But I don't think we'll see him prior to that, most likely, unless his knee does work out really well, if they feel comfortable with it. But again, it's what kind of contract does he sign? I think realistically what teams probably should do is offer him a 2-year contract with the option for a 3rd year. get him on the team right now so that you can work with him in the offseason, and then you have him have a full year to prove that he should be on the team, and then you can kind of go forward from there. But I don't know. I'm not sure what he's looking for. I don't know what he's prioritizing at this point, because it could be money, it could be just what team he wants to play for, and he doesn't care that much about anything else. It's really hard to say with him. So for now, though, we're just kind of waiting with bated breath for the most part, kind of see what he wants to do next week. But definitely going to be fun to talk about. So, but I know that you guys mentioned as well that you wanted to discuss something outside the NFL a little bit. Definitely, college football got rocked a little bit this past week in their yesterday in the championship weekend. So we had a top four that was pretty clean, assuming that the two teams who were playing in major title games that had a chance to maybe not win did win their games, but neither of them did. TCU and USC both fall to their in their conference championship games. USC in more dominating fashion, and K-State just edging out TCU in overtime, 31-28. So
TCU won.
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So with that being the case, though, we know pretty much for sure that Ohio State's going to now make the college football playoff in one of the four spots. Michigan and Georgia both win, so they're safe in their 1 and 2 spots. It all comes down to what does the committee decide to do with presumably the number 4 slot, because obviously TCU was undefeated going into conference championship weekend. They lose in overtime to another top 10 team. That to me makes it pretty clear under normal circumstances that that team's still making the playoff, right? There's no undefeated teams behind them. There's no teams that have these huge resumes that have just were waiting for someone to drop off. But there is the looming, always there, sleeping giant that is the Alabama Crimson Tide, despite 2 losses and no conference title appearance. The committee, we know how they are with the SEC bias. It's been very clear. We know how they feel about Nick Saban and his teams. Do you guys think, and I'll start with Zach on this one, do you think that there's any chance at this point, any significant chance especially, that the committee looks at things and says, you know what, Alabama, you're up, you're number 4, you're taking on Georgia again, let's see what you can do?
If they do, they just need to come out and say that the CFP is strictly about money, and that's all that matters. Because there should be no scenario for why Alabama gets in over TCU, because TCU has 11 wins and 1 loss. Alabama has 10 wins and 2 losses. TCU went to their championship game. Alabama sat and watched that championship game. TCU and Alabama both played Texas. Alabama beat Texas with a backup quarterback by 1 point. And TCU beat Quentin Ewers by 7 and held them without an offensive touchdown. I don't know why we're having this conversation at all. And furthermore, what should happen is we should be talking about why Tennessee isn't being talked about over Alabama, because their resume is better than Alabama's. But everybody's stuck on the recency bias of the fact that South Carolina whipped Tennessee, and rightfully so. I mean, that was a bad loss, but I'm not really saying that was a bad showing from Tennessee's offense. That was just Spencer Rattler losing his mind.
Yeah, all of a sudden, yeah.
So, like, what are we? And then USC went and beat Clemson. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? It's TCU's rightfully. If they couldn't get in what was it, 2014, when they didn't go to their championship game and Alabama lost theirs, then they shouldn't get it. Then there's no reason they shouldn't get in now. Yeah,
I agree for sure. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, the exact same thing. I'd actually go as far as to say TCU still deserves the 3 spot.
Yes.
They shouldn't be punished for narrowly, controversially losing their conference title game after going undefeated in the regular season. If you stack up the resumes of the 3 teams vying for the final 2 spots, you have TCU, who is 5-1 against top 25 opponents. You have Ohio State, who is 3-1 against top 25 opponents. And you have Alabama with 2 losses where the other teams have 1, and they are 0-2 against top 25 opponents. They didn't play anybody. There's this inflated vision of the SEC, partly because the 2 teams that beat Alabama got the beat Alabama bump when they in their own right didn't beat anybody of consequence. There is no conversation to be had.
Tennessee had a fantastic season. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
They
I
did.
have to
They
stop.
did.
LSU is more what I'm going
Yes,
for there.
yes,
Like,
yes, yes.
LSU
Yeah.
side of things, that they were only so highly ranked as a signature loss for Alabama because they beat Alabama. Like, there was no reason to hold LSU in that regard other than the fact that they beat Alabama, who is just not that good this year. So there's no question. It should be Georgia 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, Ohio State 4. The only reason I could see things shaking out differently is if they want to force the rematch of the game, which I think would be electric. I wouldn't be against it. I think it would very obviously be a TV money situation. As long as the right 4 teams are in, I'm not terribly concerned. So, like, it's either going to be Georgia against Ohio State or Georgia against TCU and Ohio State, Michigan, or Ohio State, Georgia. Like, those are the 4 teams. There's no conversation. They're going to force a conversation. They gave Saban the spotlight to talk during the Big Ten championship game. Like, they're seriously trying to push it, but I think that's just to like drum up talk. Like, there's no reality where it makes sense to have Alabama in there. Like you said, put Tennessee in before you ever consider Alabama.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with it, guys. Is like I do believe that makes the most sense, and that TCU clearly is more deserving of the spot, even with their loss recently. But we've seen teams in the past, like the later they lose, the more the committee just feels like they don't care as much about the rest of the resume. And that makes no sense from a logical standpoint, but that's kind of what we've seen. And I'm not going to be surprised if Alabama does sneak in, and if they do, it is going to mean that the 12-team playoff cannot come any sooner, because that will eliminate any concerns about this type of thing. Just because if you want to argue about the 13th team not making it at that point, then at that point you're just kind of never going to be happy. So realistically, if right now, I understand why people will be looking at top 4 and go, I could argue for other teams, and you can. But again, TCU deserves it still, and I think you're right, Tony. I think 3 would be the better spot for TCU to stay in, but at the same time, I do think they are going to go ahead and move Ohio State to 3 just for that matchup, honestly, if nothing else for that. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it though. Regardless, I kind of here for the chaos if they do the unthinkable, just because it's going to be funny for me to watch everybody freak out. Because I'm a Wisconsin fan, I got no business in this conversation. I don't care that much.
Oh, well, I mean,
so. Yeah.
See, I'm a Virginia Tech fan, and I can't.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, I hate Alabama. They've kicked our asses so many times.
Well, yeah, but I mean, no one really loves Alabama except for maybe our guy Luke here with ATB, but I don't know about anything else. So
well, he doesn't even want to get in, so that's fine.
Oh yeah, because he's a good
Ohio
football
State
fan.
and Michigan with a passion, and here I am advocating for them.
Yeah,
like,
but he's a good football fan.
Don't get me started on Ohio State.
Yeah, we're not even going to worry about that. But
it's okay. Virginia Tech are national championships from that year because we're the only ones that beat them.
Fair enough.
2014. Yeah, I was there. I was my freshman year.
Nice. Yeah, there you go. Let's move into the actual games this week. We're going to kick it off with Tennessee at Philadelphia. So, this is kind of a strength on weakness situation for Tennessee's Derrick Henry led offense and Philly's iffy run defense at this point. But definitely curious what you guys think about this one. Let's go to Tony first for this one.
Yeah, so I know you said strength on weakness, but the weakness of the Eagles' run defense has been a temporary situation due to the loss of Jordan Davis. You know who is back today? Jordan Davis. You know who is either, I forget if he's playing or not, but Tennessee's center is either incredibly banged up or just not playing at all.
Yeah.
Advantage Jordan Davis there. And I think you don't really have the horses to pass over the top. So Tennessee needs a very specific game script to be like owning this game. I think it's all actually going to come down to Jalen Hurts and the deep ball. Tennessee's going to allow the deep ball. It's just a matter of if the connection is made, it's game over. But if things go a different way, it'll be alive. I have Philadelphia winning 20-16. I do think it's kind of going to be the situation where they get 1 or 2 of those deep balls. It's probably going to be a big AJ Brown game, but it's going to be a trench game. And I do give advantage to the Eagles just based off of the center versus Jordan Davis situation.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, there's a bit more of a strength for strength here too as well, because the Eagles have one of the better rushing attacks in the league, and the Tennessee Titans have the best rushing defense in the league. Philadelphia is also one of the best first half scoring teams in the league, whereas Tennessee is one of the best first half defending teams in the league as far as points allowed. I am predicting the upset this week. I think Derrick Henry is going to have his way with Philadelphia, and that's going to open up Traylon Burks because he is back and feasting right now with Ryan Tannehill, and Tennessee wins 24-23.
Oh, I like it. So I do have Philly sneaking it out 27-24. I think that it's going to be a decent day offensively for both teams. I do think that Philly's run game is going to take a big step back compared to what they just did to the Packers last week. That was kind of historically bad for Packers defense, so it was kind of hard to watch if you're a Packers fan probably. But I do think it kind of comes back down to earth a little bit, especially against this Tennessee run defense. But I do think they'll get theirs in the passing game. I think Hurts has shown this year that he can do that, obviously, plenty of times. So I do think A.J. Brown is definitely going to be looking to kind of terrorize his former team here a little bit. Those corners are not the best, so I don't see them doing a great job against him. But I do think Tennessee will make it very close, and I think it's probably going to come down to like a final drive type of situation, get in a field goal range, send it home, and kind of get out of there with a good win. Yeah.
Tennessee will be an A.J. Brown away from winning this game.
And that's ironic.
Didn't the San Francisco 49ers gap the Green Bay Packers like that too in the running game?
Oh, they've done it multiple times, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
I thought that Kaepernick game was against the Packers. That's what I thought.
It certainly was. Yes, it was.
Man. Poor Packers.
Yeah, they don't handle that well. So speaking of the Packers, Green Bay at Chicago with Justin Fields seemingly ready to play this game after they had to watch Trevor Siemian play football last week. That was
jeez.
And almost
might have wanted Nathan. Yeah, it might have wanted Nathan Peterman.
Honestly, yeah, with the way it was, maybe it wasn't even going to be Siemian. But
you're the reason why I lost my teaser.
Yeah, right. No, so with that game though, Packers obviously their season is pretty much done. I would say at this point. So is Chicago, of course. These are two NFC North teams that just don't have a whole lot to play for probably the rest of the year. But what do you think for this one, Zach? What do you think?
I think this is going to be a pretty ugly game. The Chicago's going to get a little bit from their running game, but I do think that Green Bay is going to shut them down. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I have Green Bay winning 17-13.
Okay, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, similar but higher scoring. I do think both of these run defenses are terrible, and both of these offense kind of major in running the ball. So I think Green Bay is going to win 20-7-21 because Aaron Jones is the best player in the entire run world of this game. I think Justin Fields is going to have some fun, but he's probably still a bit hobbled from his injury. And so just Aaron Jones, fire him up.
I got Chicago in this one, guys, 24-20. I think that Aaron Rodgers is playing Hurts, and I don't think he should be. I think he's going to gut it out regardless, unless he were to re-injure it or make it worse. And I do not think he's going to play a very good game of football in this game. I think that Aaron Jones will get his, but I do think Fields has something to prove still. He wants to get a couple wins to close out the year because he's had so many opportunities with his big games to try to get wins, and the defense just hasn't cooperated. But this is a Packers team that just has not consistently put up points. I think this is a week he can get it done, even coming off the injury, and I want to see him do it. So we're going to go 24-20 Chicago. Next, we got...
maybe that's something the Jets do. Maybe the Jets trade for Jordan Love.
That's also something to keep in mind, too, if the Packers want to do that.
I was going to add in at the end there. I forgot to say this when I was talking about it. I think if Green Bay loses this game, we do see Aaron Rodgers go on IR to end the season, and it might be Aaron Rodgers. If he loses, I think
I need to see what Jordan Love can do.
Me too. I was a fan of his coming out, so I want to see him play a little bit more. But
he's on my 4-year dynasty team. I need something.
You want to see something? Yeah, I get
playing the long game.
Oh man, yeah. So with that though, moving on to another NFC North team is in this matchup here. Got Jacksonville at Detroit. Detroit definitely playing much better football over the past 5 or 6 weeks. Tony can attest to that, giving you guys a scare most recently. So. What do you think for this one? Let's go to Tony this time.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really fun game. The total's over 50. It's a 1-point spread. Like Vegas thinks this is going to be a shootout and fun. And I agree. Jameson Williams, he's active today. He's going to be playing on a pitch count. I don't think we're going to see much of him, but it's going to be like it's cool that he's on his way. Ultimately, I just trust Trevor Lawrence more in a shootout. He's been heating up. He's been coming into his own. He's started to figure out the like comeback kid kind of stuff like he did against the Ravens last week. So I have Jacksonville winning 28-24, but I think this is going to be a very entertaining game with a lot of really fun offense.
Makes sense. What do you think, Zach?
Detroit, baby. Detroit, baby. I feel it. They have started to turn things around. I think that their performance last week against the Bills was incredible. And had they, and I said this last week, had they won that game, that would have been the greatest 4-game winning streak in recent Detroit history. And they are going to get a thrilling victory today. 27-24 with it's going to be 24-20. With like a 2-minute drive, and Jared Goff is going to take them down the field, and they're going to score, because I think this team is finally, as much as the Jaguars have hit that spot where they believe in themselves and they want to win these games, Detroit's there too. These two teams are literally the same thing. They are on the same path. They're on the same like building blocks, and they're now hitting the same spot. This is just going to be an incredible game. But I have Detroit winning 27-24.
So I have this one as a real barn burner, 35-31 Detroit. I think that realistically, this is a team in Detroit right now that's really figured things out offensively, but still defensively are not there. I think that's going to be the focus going into the offseason, despite them kind of taking a step up this year for sure. And I think Jacksonville, like Lawrence, is hitting his stride. He certainly is. And you look at that Baltimore game, the end of that game last week, he was just on. You couldn't stop him at all. He was making every throw that you were hoping that a guy like him could make if you're Jacksonville. Zay Jones turned into a monster all of a sudden.
Lord.
Like, good for him. Honestly, I hope he can keep it up. Going to play him in some fantasy today, some daily fantasy stuff. So hoping for that. But I think that Detroit just right now, they're a slightly better football team overall than Jacksonville. I think they've really hit their stride more than ever, and they're just going to be able to pull it out. But it's going to be a very, very fun game that could go either way. Moving on to Cleveland at Houston. Again, we already kind of talked about this one a little bit. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do have my kind of own feelings on this one. What do you think for this one, Zach?
Yeah, I have Cleveland winning 27-10. Big run game today for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, just running all over the Texans. Sean Watson probably get a touchdown. I'm assuming my big thing is that Houston's going to get a couple takeaways from him, just because it's going to be a little bit rusty. It's been over 2 years since he's played an NFL snap. So 27-10 Houston, they'll get a couple points.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit closer just because of the rust element. I imagine Houston's pretty fired up about the opportunity to play this game. And then the just pure matchup wise, these are two of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Cleveland is absolutely dreadful against the run, and I think Dameon Pierce gets a little bounce back game. I do have Cleveland winning 24-17, but I think despite all the theatrics and Deshaun Watson hype about this game, we're going to come out of it talking about Nick Chubb and Dameon Pierce as the two guys that mattered in this game. And it's just going to be a running game, 24-17.
Yeah, for me, with this game, I do have it 17-14. I think it's actually going to be a very, very low-scoring football game. I think it is going to be dominated on the ground. Cleveland can't stop anybody on the ground. I think Pierce is going to have a big game. He might score both of the touchdowns that I have for Houston. And I think that Watson's going to struggle for the most part, legitimately, and that's nothing to do with him. I just think that not playing football for 2 years is real freaking hard. So it's just, he's going to it's going to take the rest of the season for him to probably get acclimated, and then they'll take it from there. But I think they pull it out just because they are the better team by far, just talent-wise. Houston really needs another year or two to get going, so going to still give them the nod there. Moving on to a game that I actually really cannot wait to see how this one goes personally. New York Jets at Minnesota. You have only barely a 3-point spread for Minnesota winning. I think there's for a reason for that, despite them just being at home still too. What do you think for this one, Tony?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a bit more of a defensive battle than people may expect, despite all the offensive weapons. These are so, especially the Jets defense, just control the trenches. Really good pass defense. They're just a very coached up defense, and they've got good players. And then the Vikings, their defense is either destroyed in a game or holds it down. And I think this is going to be one of those hold it down games, because they're not going to be tested deep or vertically very much. Patrick Peterson, he's just a true he studies the game well, and he knows where to be. He knows what to do. The pass rush, they're going to be able to do some stuff against a somewhat banged up offensive line. I do have Minnesota winning 23-20, and I think it's going to be a down late comeback situation. I think we see the return of Cardiac Kirk, dubbing that name for him. But like fire up Justin Jefferson and Garrett Wilson in daily fantasy. Those two guys are going to be their team's offenses, but I do expect it to be a little bit on the low scoring end.
Yeah. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I have it 23-17 Minnesota. Look, like I said, Mike White is a bit I think it's just because it's all hype. And all that. It's not Zach Wilson. It wasn't the starter. Like it's something different. But look, like I think this is where the Jets kind of like start to fall back a little bit because you need the quarterback. It's like the Giants. You need the quarterback. You need the weapons. And they have the weapons, but they don't have the quarterback. And Minnesota's playing an interesting game or an interesting season this year, and they've just been able to hold down games when it matters most. And I think they really just like come back, set this one down, and take care of business. Dalvin Cook gets his yards. I actually think that Justin Jefferson's going to get the one up on the Sauce Gardner battle. I think this is going to be one of the first times that Sauce is really like majorly tested by a very, very, very top-notch wide receiver, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and I think for me, like ultimately, this is probably my biggest. I wouldn't say biggest necessarily, but definitely an upset pick for me. I have the Jets 28-27. I think the Minnesota's pass defense is going to struggle with Garrett Wilson. I think that the Mike White show kind of continues for at least another week, and it just feels like Minnesota's due for one of these games. Like they've been great this year for the most part. They've been able to win most of their games, obviously, but they're just due for a team like this coming into their building that has a really tough defense that can really challenge, hopefully, for let's say Jefferson. Even Core. And I think it really just comes down to, can Dalvin Cook have a big game? Can he kind of offset the pass defense that the Jets have been able to play this year by forcing him to play more guys in the box and do that? And honestly, I think that he might fall short. It might just not be one of his weeks. So I do have Jets taking him 28-27. Next game, we got Pittsburgh at Atlanta. I don't know what to think about my team at this point, guys, but I do want to see what you have to say. Let's go to Zach here for this one first.
I have Pittsburgh winning 27-23. Look, Atlanta's offense, if they can't get the rushing game going, has to rely on Marcus Mariota to pass the ball, and that's not a good thing. And look, the introduction of TJ Watt into the defense has completely changed the Steelers team. It's given them confidence. It's stopped the other offenses from scoring. It's given Kenny Pickett some chances, and they have been scoring the football. They have been scoring some points. So I just don't see how Atlanta can really compete all three phases with Pittsburgh right now. I really think Pittsburgh's on the up, and it was a rough start, but I think things are starting to come back together with your unquestioned team captain.
Fair enough. What do you think, Tony?
Very, very similar. I also think the Steelers are on the up. Zach and I both picked them last week. They won. You did not pick them. So we're both picking them again. Hopefully that means a win. I just think they are a better team top to bottom when TJ Watt's in the lineup, and this offense it's heating up. I think Pickett is getting more and more comfortable. We're talking about George Pickens going and playing a bottom-ranked pass defense in Georgia, in Atlanta. Like, if that man might get all 3 touchdowns, I'm predicting his himself. I don't really know the running back situation with Najee, but Jalen Warren's going to go, and I mean he's explosive. But I have Pittsburgh winning 21-18. I do think it's a little bit close, but I just George Pickens, man, fire him up.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, like you said, you did pick them last week. I didn't. I just didn't feel like I could pick this team in most weeks at this point, still even with TJ Watt back. But I will pick them 27-24 this week. I think.
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, Atlanta's not a great matchup. They don't really match up well with us. I think that our run defense is going to be good enough to make them have to throw the ball to some degree. And, maybe they get a few to London just because we have given up a lot of, points to receivers this year, fantasy wise and in real life. And I think London's a tough matchup for any of our corners. But ultimately they just don't have the firepower offensively, receiver. And I think that moving forward, Steelers probably win more games than I want them to, unfortunately, which I know it sounds weird, but at this point I'd rather have, a top 10 pick than finish 8-9 or whatever we end up finishing. So, but we'll not focus on that too much. You do have Denver at Baltimore coming up next. This game just doesn't feel good for if you're Denver or really even Baltimore right now. Your offense has kind of been cratering a little bit without any weapons outside of Mark Andrews to really get the ball to. But this is a Denver team that can't score points, to save their lives. So I'm not sure if you're too worried about it. But let's go back to Tony here. What do you think for this one?
Yeah, not much to say here. I think Baltimore collapsed again last week. I will still continue to pick them as a good team because the collapses are improbable, despite the fact that they've happened nearly every game this year. I think there's a lot of noise in that. And if you look past the noise, you see a good team. You see a good team that gets up early and just kind of fails late, and that wears off, especially when the offense you're going up against has nothing. So I have Baltimore winning 17-6. I think it's just another stifled Broncos offense, and it's just one that the Ravens don't collapse in.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
I have the Ravens winning 20-14. Look, I mean, Denver's offense is just atrocious. I don't think there's anything else to say about it. But their defense has done very well this year, and they've played very, very, even with the loss of Bradley Chubb, they've been doing somewhat respectable. So the rushing aspect is a bit of a concern for them, especially with Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards coming and all this stuff. But it's just not going to be. They can't score points. Nathaniel Hackett's going to be a one and done.
Yeah, and that definitely feels like that's the case, Zach. I think we're pretty confident on that one. I do have Baltimore in 24-16. I think they get a couple big plays this week finally and kind of open things up a little bit. Maybe Lamar has a couple big runs or something. But again, Denver, I'm giving them 16 points just because that's the most I'm willing to give them at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think that they might be able to get there just because Baltimore has had trouble keeping teams from coming back on them, like you kind of mentioned, Tony. So not expecting them to win, but I do think they'll at least kind of make it a little more respectable than the line at -10 is suggesting. Moving to Washington at New York Giants. This one's definitely interesting to me because definitely big playoff implications where all the NFC East teams are just playing out of their mind, except for the Giants really at this point. What do you think for this one? Let's go to Zach for this one.
I have Washington winning again, 25-17. This rushing defense is coming in hot, and they're doing really well. They got Chase Young back. I'm confident in this Washington team. I definitely think they make the playoffs. They're playing very good football. They're playing very together football. That game last week was awesome to watch. From being in the area, it's just kind of really cool to see all the fans around here kind of jazzed about football again because it was kind of in the dumps for a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's fun to see them all excited.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think every game of this hot streak for Washington, I have picked against them, and I still stand by the fact that they are not a good team. They are playing like not good football. They're just winning games. I am willing to pick them to win this one, though. I don't think they're going to play good football. I just think that the Giants aren't really in a position to play good football, and like you said, the run defense of Washington really stifles anything that the Giants want to do on offense. So I have Washington winning 20-17 in a close one, and really taking a stranglehold on that wild card position for that division. Just quick side point. I know we had talked about the rankings earlier. This might be the first year that the committee has just done the right thing, and it is official. It is Georgia 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, Ohio State 4.
Yes.
Oh, so they did leave TCU 3.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So
yes.
This is the first year where I can say you know what, they did the right thing. So
I will actually watch the college football.
Call back to our early discussion, and the committee did right.
All right. Perfect.
I will actually watch the playoff this year.
Yep. Good to know. Awesome. All right. So good breaking news there, Tony. Appreciate it. So back to Washington and New York Giants. So this is the good bad bowl is what I'm going to call it. They're good, but they're bad, and they're playing. So it's the good bad bowl. I'm going to give it to the Giants this time, just because I feel like this is going to be a split on the season, and I'll take them in the situation at home. That's pretty much how it is.
Oh, this would be a sweep?
I thought Washington didn't
they play their second game in 2 weeks.
That's what I was gonna say. They haven't played each other yet. So
okay.
that's why, so I'm giving the Giants this one. I think they're gonna split ultimately.
Okay.
I do think I'll take the Giants at home. I think they can get it done. I think, like I said, both of these teams are kind of playing way above their talent level overall, or at least their competency level as a franchise right now. I think that Washington probably still has the edge to make the playoffs out of this group. If the NFC East isn't all going to make the playoffs, which I doubt, but I'll give Giants the nod this week. Moving on to Seattle at Rams. Rams. Oh boy. At this point, it's kind of just sad to talk about. We kind of know that their season is beyond done. They are cooked. It's just not good. But what do you think for this one? Let's go to Tony this time.
Yeah, so they put Stafford on IR. They shut him down for the season, basically. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. Congratulations, Detroit Lions. You can do whatever you want this season. You're getting a top 3 pick. I have Seattle winning this one 28-17. No Aaron Donald in this game. I think Kenny Walker is going to have a great day. Jalen Ramsey hasn't really been himself, and without anybody else on the team, I think they can pass on him too. I do think 17 points. I think we start to see Bryce Perkins maybe I don't know. McVay's going to figure something out with him. It's not going to be pretty, but I think they're going to start to score points. But yeah, the Rams are dead this year.
I do believe John Wolford is starting.
Yeah, so John Wolford, I believe, is going to be.
Okay. Well, either way.
But that's going to go into my score because 28-10 Seattle. Look, the Rams have nothing on offense. They're just kind of floundering, going back and forth between quarterbacks. Seattle is trying to get into the playoffs. They've had a really good season this year. I don't necessarily think last week was a breakdown on defense and really just bad defense by them. I don't think it was necessarily a bad sign overall.
Yeah,
just a bad week.
Josh Jacobs, man.
And I don't know how you're supposed to stop a running back who has 326 total purpose yards, or was it 380 I don't know.
I know he had 229 rushing yards.
It was insane. I had on my fantasy team,
but
it was 48 fantasy points. Man. But Seattle's going to get the win 28-10. Kenneth Walker gets his touchdowns. Nice easy day for them.
Yeah. So, Tony, you and I were on the same wavelength. I have 28-17 as well, Seattle. I think that the Rams get a couple of touchdowns just because, like you said, they can figure something out against the Seattle defense isn't particularly great. But Gino keeps it rolling. I think he bounces, their whole team bounces back from that really awful loss last week. That just really, I'm sure, was difficult to even think about. But they get the win. They keep they keep the train rolling a little bit here and keep things going. We have Chargers at Las Vegas this week. I think it's interesting that the Raiders are, from what I see, favored by a point in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the Chargers are kind of being the Chargers this year again, which we all know they can do. But I'm a little confused about that line personally. But what do you think for this one, Tony? We'll go to you this time.
So the reason that line exists is because the Chargers are playing without their left tackle, right tackle, and center.
Yeah, they did that Herbert's whole first year anyway, pretty much. They didn't have any of those guys anyway. So.
Yes, but Max Crosby can take over a game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think Max Crosby will take over this game. In any other scenario, without those injuries, I'd be picking Chargers to win confidently. But I do have the Raiders winning 26-19, which is a weird score, but it felt deserving for this game. I just think that they're a better team when you stack up all those injuries on the offensive line.
All right. What do you think, Zach?
I have the Raiders winning as well. And it's going to be their third straight overtime game. It's going to be 30-30 going into overtime. The Chargers will get the ball first. They're going to kick a field goal, and then Josh Jacobs is going to score a touchdown.
All right.
Josh Jacobs is going to abuse a rushing defense that allows 150 yards per game.
Yeah, it's definitely something to factor in.
It's going to be bad.
I think that's very possible, but I'm going to go out on a limb, and I have a feeling this is going to be a big-time Justin Herbert performance. I think he has been hearing noise from a particular person that I will remain nameless on social media and his show, talking about him and how he's not a good quarterback for whatever reason, or that he's a social media quarterback, despite the fact that he doesn't have social media and refuses to be on camera at pretty much every moment that he can. But beside that point, I'm going to take the 34-24 over the Raiders. I really feel like that's what's going to happen this week. I just have a bad feeling the Raiders cannot stop Herbert in the passing game, even without Mike Williams out there. Just feels like one of those weeks that, Herbert's coming off of his win against Cardinals where he gets a 2-point to win the game. There's confidence there's been this whole year, I think, personally. And even without the guys on the offensive line, Herbert's shown that even without those guys there, he can make stuff happen. We saw it his rookie year. We've seen it last year as well. Like, even with Slater, he obviously was a big help last year, but it didn't change the outcome of a lot of the offensive performances that much realistically. I do feel confident about the Chargers beating the Raiders this week. Moving on to Indianapolis at Dallas. I know how this game should go. Let me just put it that way. So let's just go back to Zach. What do you think for this one?
I have Dallas winning 35-13. Look, the interim mystique has worn off. There's not much left in Indianapolis. Matt Ryan is better than Sam Ehlinger, but it's still 37-year-old Matt Ryan. Tony Pollard, the Dallas has figured out how to rush Tony Pollard and Zeke now. They figured out how to do the tandem. It's going to be a bad day for the Colts.
What do you think, Tony?
I completely agree. I have Dallas winning 27-10. I don't know why we are seeing Jeff Saturday in back-to-back primetime games. I hate that.
Flex them.
Seriously, yeah. It's
Dallas playing, and they're gonna let him play it out. Like, let him. That's what the NFL is gonna do. Like,
it should have been the Dolphins and
for sure, yeah, but we don't get that.
That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah,
Dallas
yeah.
big.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, you're good. I think Dallas 27-13 is my score. I think that the Colts defense has enough pride in it to not give up too many points, but Colts offense doesn't have enough juice to score that many more points. I think Taylor could have a decent game if they lean on him, but I don't think it's going to be nearly enough. I think you're going to need some big plays from Matt Ryan, and he's not going to find them, honestly. Moving on to New Orleans at Tampa Bay. This game does have, weirdly enough, playoff implications still up to this point because the NFC South is just not good. It's just bad. Jacoby Brissett gave us one final gift as he, assuming the rest of the year likely sits the bench. He gave us a overtime loss for Tom Brady, which is just peak NFL content. But what do you guys think for this one? Let me go back to Zach for this one.
Hey, at least he shook his hand.
Yeah.
I
mean, they're former team. He got to shake.
I know.
Imagine if he didn't. Like, Tom would have to hide away from the media the rest of the year.
But I'm going to tell you, he's not shaking anybody's hand today because they're going to lose. It's going to be 17-14 New Orleans because they're going to do what they do best and just be on demon time with the Tampa Bay offense because they know how to stop them. They are one of the best teams to stop them in the past 3 years since he's been there. And it's
like clockwork.
It's like clockwork. Like even last year when they looked like they were dead in the water, they still found a way to, what was that, 3-0 or something like that? That like
some ridiculous,
really bad game that one day. Last year, I don't know what it is. Mike Evans will probably lose his temper because Marshawn Lattimore is questionable. I think he is going to go. But yeah, no, New Orleans 17-14.
So I do want to. Well, let me go back to Tony because I wanted to say something, but I'll leave it for mine. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I've got Tampa Bay winning 17-7. I agree with all the New Orleans knows how to stop Tampa Bay, but New Orleans doesn't have an offense and Tampa Bay, no credit to them in this win. I don't think they're going to win because they play good football. I think the opponent is just that bad. So you could probably do something else with your Monday night and be happier for it.
Yeah, I mean, usually watching Tom Brady on Monday nights is usually a good thing. I don't know if that's really going to qualify. I do actually, believe it or not, have a weird score, and I'll explain why. I have 28-17 Tampa winning. But I think at least 10 of those points come directly off of turnovers in the form of a pick six of some kind or some sort of defensive touchdown and just, a short field score from Tampa Bay because of a turnover. But I just feel like New Orleans has rolled over and died. You know, when you get shut out now, I believe it is twice this year so far. You just
Okay, I feel you there. However, did you watch that game last week?
I know it was very unlucky for them.
Like just every single thing that could happen for them to score did not happen.
Exactly. And like I just think that this is a team that just isn't they don't have it, right? Like they're not getting lucky bounces even. They're not they're not forcing luck itself to kind of go their way. Like they're not doing anything to make me think that they can score any amount of points right now. And I'll be surprised if they can score enough on offense. I think the defense is going to be the problem though, is that they're not the problem, but they're going to stop Tampa for the most part. But I think the Saints offense is going to hand them the ball a couple times, and that's really all they probably have to do. But last two games, biggest games of the week, I do want to start with the game that is it's so interesting to me because it's two teams, one in the Miami Dolphins, I'm just going to say Miami, San Francisco is the game we're talking about, who have completely reinvented themselves because of a coach from this team's former staff or for a player on or coach on this former staff. And San Francisco, who's now coming into their own after injuries have subsided, and they got Christian McCaffrey in there, and they've built up the offensive identity again. And the fact that right now, at least, San Francisco is obviously they're at home, but they're a 4-point favorite, I do think is interesting, just because of the fact that Miami's offense has been so high powered. But I do think there's a good reason for that. I wanted to turn it over to Zach first here with your team being in this matchup. What are you looking for in this, and what do you think this outcome is going to be?
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason that spread is -4 is because we will be starting Greg Little and I don't even know the other guy's name.
Who's the other tackle going to play today? I'm not sure.
One sec. Let me pull up the depth chart here. That's how bad things are right now for the offensive line because there's no depth. It is Greg Little and Brandon Shell. So left tackle will be Brandon Shell,
former New York Jet, Brandon Shell,
and right tackle will be Greg Little. And this was after we were going to be having Austin Jackson, who actually has been playing a lot better this year. But the big loss is Terron Armstead. Obviously, yes. That's the big one. Look, these are two awesome teams that have been playing some great football. My concern for this week is Tua's health. And granted, I said this last week when he played in the second half. I wanted him to play in the second half because if you know that Terron Armstead might be out for next week, why are you going to put Tua in for his first snaps with less than okay coverage against the San Francisco 49ers when you can have a trial run against the Houston Texans? We saw what happened against the Houston Texans. However, I also argue if the man can't take a hit, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You have to be able to take hits in the NFL. And we can't you can't sit there and just be like, oh, what's going to happen if Tua gets sacked? Like that's a part of the game. If you're worried about him getting sacked, then what are we doing? So you have to be, people have to let him play football. He has to be able to play football. I know he's taking some hits. I know they look bad, but in the end of the day, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. It is like when you get tackled, it is like getting into a car crash. What happens when you get into a car crash? You can die. You can get severely hurt. It is just the way that this works. It sucks, but you gotta let him play. So yeah. I definitely think that's why this is. I do think they cover and they'll try to come back and make it 27-24. But in the end, I think San Francisco is winning this game.
All right. What do you think, Tony?
I have San Francisco winning for a lot of the same reasons. I have even less. I have a bigger, not blowout, but bigger margin of victory for San Francisco. I think that with all the hype going into this game, talking about offensive weapons, talking about offensive coordinators, head coaches, the Shanahan Mike McDaniel matchup, we're gonna come out of it talking about one man, D'Amico Ryans. His ability to scheme up a defense is unmatched in the NFL right now. And the players that he has on this roster are just unbelievable in that front seven. You have Fred Warner, who is the he might be a defensive player of the year candidate. Like he's so good. And then the defensive linemen they have coming and what they're going to be able to do to Brandon Shell or whatever that other guy's name was.
Greg Little.
Greg Little, yeah.
Yes. It's going to be ugly. And so I have San Francisco winning 31-20. I think McDaniel's going to do all he can. He's still going to be like, in his bag pulling out tricks, but D'Amico Ryans is going to dominate this matchup given that Teron Armstead injury. I would still be picking San Francisco in a close game, but this just gives me all the power to say, like, I think that right now the 49ers defense is going to be dominant.
The Dolphins need to be happy that Javon Kinlaw is still hurt.
Yeah, that helps. I will say I do have the Niners winning 28-24. I do think though that it's going to be interesting to see how the Dolphins offense does look overall, because I think that especially without their starting tackles, if Tua and the passing game especially, and even the run game to a certain extent, if they can still look very good or even do enough to come out and win this game ultimately, any questions that people might still have about this team's efficacy for at least this year, I think you have to kind of just hide away and not talk about it anymore, because there's no better team to stop what they do than the 49ers, because they know exactly who Mike McDaniel is. There's no way D'Amico Ryans does not have everything that he could imagine planned for this game. He knows exactly what type of offense they're running. Like there's not a better situation for a defense to come out and smack them in the mouth and show that this team isn't as good offensively as they've been. So if they can do that, if it's a high scoring game and that their defense just can't keep up with San Francisco, then I think that bodes really well, even if they do lose ultimately. So if you're a Miami fan, if you win this game or if you lose it close, I think you have to be very, very happy with it. Just don't get blown out. And I think people will mostly be alone. So, but the last game we want to talk about is a huge game. This is going to be the third matchup now over the past 2 years of these teams.
Oh, no. It's within a year.
Exactly. Yeah.
All of these games are within 365.
One calendar year. Within one calendar year. Yeah. But Kansas City at Cincinnati. So again, at Cincinnati. It's really interesting because you look at it from last year's perspective. Obviously, Cincinnati did make the playoffs and make the Super Bowl as well, and they did have to beat the Chiefs to do it. But you could argue the Chiefs were more talented last year, and they still couldn't beat Cincinnati either time. But I think things are a little bit different this year for both teams. So what do you think for this one, Tony?
This is such a cool game because it's the rematch of the rematch. It's it's such an important game. It matters so much to me because if the Bengals win, then the Bills have a good shot at the 1 seed. But it is so cool because we saw these two teams go head to head twice last year, and they were both incredible games. One of them with the AFC championship on the line. Both quarterbacks are improved significantly from that year. And the rosters, I think, are both kind of weaker almost, but the quarterbacks have both elevated to another level. And so Patrick Mahomes, he's playing some of the best football I have ever seen. His weapons aren't as good, but he's playing some of the best football I have ever seen. Their defense is kind of a question mark, and then on the Bengals side, like getting Jamar Chase back for this game, huge. But what Joe Burrow has morphed into without Jamar Chase is so much better than what he was last year when, which is crazy to say, given that he took them to a Super Bowl appearance. I have the Bengals winning. I really struggled with this. I have them winning 31-28. I do think if it gets that high scoring, then it's almost a sure thing that the Bengals are the winning team because they're going to do it with the explosive plays, right? Whereas the Chiefs are probably doing it more of a methodical marching down the field, distributing to a lot of underneath guys. And the reason I have the Bengals winning ultimately is because of Big Lou Anarumo. He knows how to scheme up against his defense. And last year he was doing it when you were forced into playing zone because you couldn't man up against Tyreek Hill because you knew what that was going to do. This year, he's got his full arsenal available because you can play man against these receivers and you can win. And I just think he's going to be able to do some incredible things and ultimately seal a victory. It could be like a late interception. I don't know, like giving up 28 points is an incredible defensive performance, but when it's Patrick Mahomes, people are going to be talking about Big Lou and what he does against this Chiefs team.
All right. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah. This is the only game that I didn't get a score down for because I really don't know what's going to happen. these are two teams that are playing really well. Cincinnati started out pretty rough, but they've really responded well after their rough start. Even despite some injuries, they've been playing some good football. They get Jamar Chase back, and that's huge. I just Patrick Mahomes, like you said, Tony. Patrick Mahomes has been playing out of his mind. Their defense has been playing out of their minds. Isaiah Pacheco has been a really good addition for just some added toughness in the running game and just getting those tough yards. You know, we talk about, and you talking about the Bills wanting the first seed. Shoot, if the Kansas City Chiefs loses, the Miami goes in line for the first seed too. So if they win, I mean, yeah, but there's still another game coming. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I just think that Kansas City is just too much for Cincinnati right now. They're too much for everybody. They're the team to beat in the AFC. I have Kansas City winning this game. I don't have a score. I just can't. I don't know what's going to happen.
So for me, I do have Kansas City winning 31-24. I think it's going to be a very good game. I do think, though, that at this point, Patrick Mahomes is playing on a different level than anyone else is in the NFL. I know that there's going to be talk about every week, like the biggest performer of that week outside of him being like, oh, could they be the MVP? At this point, unless Mahomes, starts to truly play worse than he's playing, or someone else just completely starts going off to levels we haven't seen them do this year, Mahomes is the MVP of the NFL right now. It's what it is. And when you have the MVP on your team and he's playing the way he has been, and you're playing a Bengals defense that has struggled recently, they gave 30 points to my team, and we can't score points, maybe a little bit more lately, but still. And it just feels to me like Kansas City is a machine that's not going to get stopped very much until the playoffs. And maybe, the Bills can stop them if they have to play them in the championship. Maybe this Bengals team could, see them again, depending on what they do the rest of the year. But it's kind of hard for me not to pick the Chiefs right now, considering the whole package of where the Bengals are at. Even if offensively they're great, I don't think they're as good overall and consistent as the Chiefs, and I trust the Chiefs defense more at this moment than I do the Bengals defense. So that's just kind of where it falls. So anything else you guys want to add to that game, or anything else before we kind of sign off for the week?
It's a good day of football. Just
it should be.
It's a great slate this week. We've been bereft of some great matchups, so enjoy the full slate. We have a lot of bye weeks, a lot of buys next week. So
yes, we do. So
abbreviated slate.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind. But if you have Red Zone, definitely have it on. This is the week to have Red Zone.
Oh, if you have Red Zone, Scott Hansen, go to Scott Hansen's Twitter profile, and he put an explanation as to what happened last week with the Raiders game, and it was and Scott Hansen is a football announcer for the people. He cares about the football.
That guy is legit,
and he sincerely apologized. He did not realize that the Raiders and Seattle game was not a nationally broadcasted game. So he's pledged to get a bit more information on that in the future, so that way people don't miss out on the end of that. However, I will say that they put that touchdown at the end of the montage. So if you're watching the montage, you saw how they won. So.
Right. So, but yeah, definitely look, check that out. If you guys have Red Zone, just watch as much football as you can. There's going to be a lot of good options for that. I do have to watch Pitt at Atlanta regardless, even if I didn't want to. So that's, me.
But I'll probably have about the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'll probably have something else on in the meanwhile too, another game. But definitely enjoy the football weekend, everybody. We'll be back next week, like I said, with a brief or abbreviated schedule. But take care, and definitely thank you for watching.